Ooh, child. Listen, I done had enough. Just keep getting these lemons sour all the time. I pucker my lips, yeah, I might get stepping on pills now. I don't slip, just keep getting these lemons. It should be a crime. What you gon' find is I don't quit. I'ma show out now. Life is giving lemons every second and hour. I think I used to be sweeter, but now I'm feeling too sour. I used to feel on top and now I'm losing my power. Now I just do it, get a check and get a meal and devour. I ran out of juice to make the lemonade. Millions like a blast, maybe I'm afraid. But only I don't have to parade. Feel really fast when I hit the skip, getting these lemons sour all the time. I pucker my lips, yeah, I might get stepping on pills now. I don't slip, just keep getting these lemons. It should be a crime. What you gon' find is I don't quit. I'ma show out now. I'm the I don't want 'em no more. No, I don't want 'em no lemons. No lemons, no. I don't want 'em no more. No, I don't want 'em no lemons. No lemons. Sour all the time. I pucker my lips, yeah, I might get stepping on pills now. I don't slip, just keep getting these lemons. It should be a crime. What you gon' find is I don't quit. I'ma show out now. I'm the
Hello and thanks for joining me. So everything that you saw in that video, plus the footage that you're seeing right now, was shot on Insta360's new One RS 1-inch 360 edition camera, which has dual 1-inch sensors, which give you better tonality, better low light performance, and overall just a more cinematic looking image. First of all, I want to start off by saying this video is sponsored by Insta360, but I was genuinely excited to try out this camera because I've been wanting to use 360 cameras to intercut with my gimbal shots and my other A camera footage seamlessly for a long time now. I have used 360 footage in my shoots before, but usually just as sort of a special effect. I would use them for one quick shot with a lot of motion, and I would add motion blur in post to sort of hide the 360 look. I love all the creative options that you have with 360 cameras, but what's been holding me back is just the image quality. I didn't feel like they looked quite good enough to intercut with my A camera footage. So finally, I feel like Insta360 has made a small, portable 360 cinema camera. The Insta360 One RS 1-inch 360 edition uses the same RS core as the 4K boost lens and the 1-inch wide angle lens and the 360 lens. This is part of the One RS system, so it is compatible with the same core unit. That means that if you want to upgrade and you don't want to rebuy everything, you could just buy the upgrade kit without buying the core all over again. The older 1R core will also work with the 1-inch 360 edition, but you need to use the 1RS vertical battery base and the 1RS mounting bracket for the 1-inch 360 lens. The 1R vertical battery base won't work with the 1-inch 360 edition. The only major drawback versus previous editions of Insta360 smaller cameras is that it is a bit bigger, a bit heavier, not by a lot, but it's a little chunkier. So if you're mounting it in extremely weight sensitive situations, then you might want to take that into consideration. The stabilization performance seems about the same as the One RS and the One X series and the Insta360 Go. They're all about the same to me. They all stabilize really well. The recommended shooting distance for this camera for best stitching is 0.5 meters, but I found personally I was able to go a lot closer as long as I was mindful of where the stitching line would be in post, and I just avoided crossing that line with my main subject. There are still situations where this camera won't work, such as very low light environments or extreme high contrast environments, but it's a big step forward nonetheless, and you have to keep in mind that nothing else exists at this size and this weight and this price at the moment. You should be aware that this camera is water resistant, not waterproof, so you wouldn't really want to dunk it underwater, but it's okay in light rain or a little bit of snow. The kit that I used for the footage that you saw here was the 1-inch camera and the 3-meter extended edition selfie stick. This gives you almost 10 feet of reach, so you can get some really high up drone type of shots. When I moved my selfie stick, I tried to move it in more of a linear motion rather than in an arc, so it looked more like a crane or a drone shot and less like a fishing pole. I shot it in 6K 24p, standard color, not vivid, not log, and I turned down my sharpness to low. And I locked my exposure each time before shooting. I did my usual gimbal ninja walk to get smooth footage here, just like I do when I'm holding a gimbal. This is because the gyro stabilization on these 360 cameras functions very similarly to a 3-axis gimbal, which means that it stabilizes the pan, tilt, and roll, but it still won't eliminate that up and down bobbing motion as you walk. I composed my shots with reframing in mind, which means I did a mental preview of how I might want to reframe the shot. I sort of imagined it like a gimbal, and I just thought of which direction the camera would be pointed at each position in the shot, and then I reframed it in post accordingly.
Look straight ahead, ignore the camera. 3, 2, 1, here we go.
One thing to keep in mind if you're shooting with a 360 camera and you plan on reframing it in post is that you can change the pan, the tilt, or the roll all that you want, but you can't change the overall perspective. So the physical position of that camera in space still does matter. You can't change where the camera is placed in post. You can only change what direction it's looking. So you still need to position the camera really carefully to get good framing. I also chose my lighting carefully. This camera looks best with direct, strong sunlight for lots of saturation in the shot. Cloudy days will look a bit more dull, a bit more boring, as they would with any camera, but even more so because you're shooting 360. At night, it works the best, of course, in well-lit environments. It's good in low light, much better than previous 360 cameras, but still not as good as a full-frame mirrorless or cinema camera would be, so I still was aware of the ambient light level as I was shooting at night. That's why I shot in Times Square. In editing, I used the Insta360 Studio Desktop Edition for most shots. I reframed using keyframes, and I kept my field of view on average about 75 degrees, and I added in some fisheye distortion to avoid having too much stretching on the corners of my shots. Because with 360 footage, basically, you can either choose to have a fisheye look or a pincushion look. I generally chose to keep a bit of the fisheye look as opposed to going full pincushion with too much stretching on the edges. For keyframing, I used the fade in, fade out setting for most shots. Sometimes I did use the slip in or the slip out for a faster start or faster finish to the shot. I exported my reframed shots in ProRes to DaVinci Resolve, and then I added motion blur to the shots in Resolve using the RealSmart Motion Blur plugin. Final thoughts here. Overall, I think this camera is a must-buy. If you're looking for a pocketable, mobile, 360 camera that can shoot cinematic footage, there's really nothing else on the market now or probably anytime soon in this price range at this size that will look as good as this camera. So if you're on the fence about upgrading your 360 camera system, I think you should just go ahead and get this one. Now, that said, it's definitely not perfect. No 360 camera is yet, so here are my thoughts for improvement. First of all, I want better bitrate and better bit depth. That means I want to be able to record more than 100 megabits per second, preferably 200, even 300 megabits per second, or H.265. And I want to be able to record at 10-bit. I want 10-bit color instead of 8-bit color so that I can do better highlight recovery, shadow recovery, and overall just color grading. Another thing on my wish list, I want better keyframe controls in the Insta360 Studio app, the desktop app specifically, because right now the slip in, slip out, and fade in, fade out are not enough for me to be able to reframe the shot exactly how I want. And one more idea here, I want to be able to export viewfinder data from the mobile app to the desktop app. That means I want to be able to wave my phone around to reframe it on the mobile app, and then I want to take that data and put it on the desktop app with the same clip and be able to tweak those keyframes, and then export in a higher quality than I can do with the mobile app. Overall, I highly recommend this camera if you're looking to upgrade your 360 system. So thank you so much for watching. Please click like and subscribe. Once again, I'm Brandon Lee, and I'll see you next time.